Hello everyone, this is Erik, the Asian movie enthusiast, and this is part 2 of our exploration of Asian horror films released during 2012. Now we have a few more underwhelming titles to cover tonight, but then we will crack into some of the more watchable films from this year. None of the films that I'm covering tonight are high priority titles, but a few of them may be worth checking out if they seem to be up your alley, so pay attention. And as always, titles for all the movies I discuss will be listed in the description box below. Now our first film tonight is pretty bad. I just rewatched it a few weeks ago and was reminded that it was a very poorly made film. Could have been included in part 1 of this playlist had I rewatched it prior to making that video. And that is Nak from 2012, a South Korean horror film. Now this film opens with a shaman ritual gone bad. Art student Jung-hwa is moving to a smaller apartment by her school when she trips and falls, breaking a small statue on a box. She bends over to pick up the pieces and notices an amulet in the shape of a mask and decides to use it for her exhibit assignment. And after she crafts a shaman mask for her project, she hears a weird knocking sound next door. She can't sleep because this sound continues every night, and she soon experiences strange things. Now, the first thing you're going to notice about Nak is that the lead actress is atrocious. She comes off as like a bimbo with no acting skills whatsoever. Every facial expression that she makes throughout the entire film is artificial, distracting, and unwatchable. She is unwatchable. Now, we do not see this often in South Korean horror films, right? In my last video, I covered Don't Click, which was not a good film, but it still had legitimately good acting. That is not the case with this one, at least with regard to the lead. Now, the supporting actress is, I think, quite a bit better. She gets a decent amount of screen time as well, so it definitely helps to make this film slightly more bearable. But all of the scare tactics in Nak are very mediocre. It uses the Onryo ghost in ways we've seen plenty of times before. And not only that, the way the horror scenes are filmed are awkward and goofy. Now obviously our lead actress contributes some overacted facial expressions that kill the mood of all of these horror scenes, but the direction and staging of the scares are frequently abrupt and amateurish. It's kind of a failure on all levels here. It also adds in a human-related threat that's very unconvincing. The script attempts to slowly build its plot, but the writing is run-of-the-mill and frankly boring to watch. It's kind of hard to care about anything that happens in this film. The ending is very lame. It's actually quite embarrassing. So take my advice, stay away from Nak. It should have been included in part 1 of this video, I think. It's pretty bad stuff. Now, Nak is difficult to find. You might be able to find it on some of the paid streaming sites like Cineflix or some of those sites, but don't worry about it if you don't see it. All right, our next film tonight is actually from Taiwan, and it is called Zombie 108. And this is a horror action hybrid. Now, set in the downtown of Taipei, a sin-darkened district packed with violence and drugs is now confronted with a far worse situation. The whole area turns into chaos as a zombie virus sweeps across the land. Now, seemingly overnight, the city falls into a bloody post-apocalypse. Gangster bosses, police officers, SWAT teams, and the citizens themselves end up having to cooperate with one another to survive this nightmare. But will hidden agendas break them apart and disrupt their chances of survival? Now this begins with a montage that gets us up to speed with things. Then you see a cute girl in short shorts who decided not to wear a bra. Some nudity then follows, and you kind of get an idea of the problems that are going to plague this movie. Zombie 108 tries to be edgy, but it comes off as juvenile instead. Now there's always something happening in this movie, which is good for a zombie movie. But the direction is very underwhelming here. I did not like the camera work in this because it uses way too many close-up shots of people or zombies that gets really irritating. There's no, I guess, geography to the framing of the shots. The editing is headache-inducing. I kid you not, there's an edit every 10th of a second during the zombie attacks. It's just infuriating. The zombie attacks themselves are staged in very conventional, run-of-the-mill ways. Acting is pretty bad, as are the attempts at humor. Dialogue, it's also very poorly written. Now, all of these flaws in particular create kind of an annoying film that does some serious damage to its overall quality. There's definitely a lack of craftsmanship in Zombie 108. It's real shoddy, low-grade stuff. It's only 83 minutes long, but it's still actually pretty hard to sit through, unbelievably. I mean, personally, I'd rather watch some of, Lucille Fulci's more entertaining zombie films like, City of the Living Dead or Zombie 2. If I want something that's a little bit more, I don't know if you would call those low-grade, lower budget, but still enough to give you a nice evening of entertainment. Zombie 108 does not do that. Again, pretty poor film here that I probably could have included in part 1 of this video, but the good news is that this same director would later make a spin-off film called Zombie Fight Club that is more entertaining than Zombie 108, and we will review that film when we reach 2014 in this playlist. So the availability of Zombie 108 is that it's moderately available on DVD and Blu-ray. Alright, our next 3 films tonight are all from Thailand. So we're going to do a little Thai streak here. Now the first one is called Mae Nak 3D. Now this is another retelling of one of the most well-known ghost stories in Thai culture. This film is set in the 1800s and is based off of a very popular legend about a pregnant woman whose husband is called away to military service. The man later returns home to his wife and child, but suspects that something strange is going on. I could probably discuss more about the story, but I'd like to avoid spoilers for those who are unfamiliar with how the story plays out. Now this is a traditional Thai ghost film, which has already been made into multiple feature films that are better than this inferior adaptation. Now acting and scare tactics range from okay to below average. There's nothing really memorable or effective here. Production values are pretty off in this, actually. There's some obviously fake CGI to sit through at certain points, and the scene transitions feel amateurish and low-grade at times. The biggest problem with this movie, however, is that it's really boring to watch. The script, inexplicably forces too many wafer-thin side characters into the mix, a few of which contribute some lame comic relief. There are multiple scenes that feel like dead weight in this film. It just felt like either the runtime was too long, or it just lacked focus. Too many side characters that really don't have much of an impact on the story, and I didn't really care about. That was a big problem. There's not a whole lot more to say about Mae Nak 3D. I mean, I would say if you're interested in finding a film that explores a traditional Thai legend, I would say watch Nang Nak from 1999 instead, at least as a starter. And then, if you really like that one, then you could seek out a few more films related to this legend. But Nang Nak is a far better film than Mae Nak 3D, I'll tell you that much. And this film is available on DVD and YouTube without subtitles. So I think you can find it on DVD with subs, but it's on YouTube. I couldn't find a version with subs, so you might have to watch it without if you want to stream it. Alright, our next Thai film here is called 3 a.m. Again, from 2012, of course. Now, this is an anthology of 3 short films. The title refers to the time when bad stuff happens in each of the films. Now, typically with anthologies, sometimes you have some that are good, some that are not good. So if an anthology has at least a few, let's say 2 out of these 3 short films are very good, I think I could recommend it to you. So let's see what happens here. Now, the first story is entitled The Wig. 2 sisters, May and Mint, own and work in a wig shop. May is a hard worker, while Mint is a selfish teenager. Now, one day, Mint buys hair from a woman without knowing that it was stolen from a corpse in a cemetery and makes a wig out of it. Mint's boyfriend makes fun of the wig, but the spirit gets pissed off and seeks revenge against Mint and her friends. So this actually starts off fairly well, despite the somewhat outlandish premise. I like the lead actress in this, and the production values are slick. Unfortunately, this kind of nosedives when it resorts to cheap scare tactics and annoying side characters. You know what I'm talking about here. Jump scares where no danger is present. There's multiple ones of those in this. Onryo ghosts popping out at people, which I don't know if anybody really likes. And obnoxious college kids who like to get drunk and act stupid. So yeah, it's not good. The ending is also quite lame, to add insult to injury. Not a good film. I would say if you want a horror film based on hair, check out Hair Extensions from Japan or The Wig from South Korea instead. They're better movies about haunted hair. And I covered both of those, I think, in this playlist already. Now, the second film in this anthology is The Bride's Corpse. A funeral home employee named Tos is tasked to prepare the funeral of the recently married and deceased Cherry and Mike. Now, To believes Cherry was abused by Mike when she was alive, and he eventually falls in love with her and challenges Mike, but soon he finds the truth about the couple with tragic consequences. So this one is kind of a bit slow to start, but it gradually becomes pretty good and even a bit perverted. You know, the domestic abuse angle does add a little bit of edge to things, and this story mostly avoids cheap scares and goes for a more mature style, which I appreciated. This is probably the best segment of this anthology, which isn't exactly saying much. So it's kind of interesting how this guy kind of pursues this dead woman and, ends up competing with the dead dude over this dead woman. So it's a little weird, but I kind of liked it, you know. The third film in this anthology is called Overdrive. Now, Karan and T own a company, and they love to play scary pranks on the employees that are working overtime at night. One night, they play several pranks with tragic consequences. Now, this is a horror comedy that simply is not funny at all. There's nothing in this story that's even smile-worthy, actually. I mean, maybe it was just me, but this just did not work in the humor element for me. Most of the scares that our protagonists use to scare other people are thoughtless jump scares, which are accompanied by really annoying screams by the victims. So it's not even an interesting exploration of the premise. You know, if, anybody who lives in the United States or has access to the Sci-Fi Channel should remember the TV show Scare Tactics, which I actually found quite entertaining most of the time. You know, it's these people who kind of set somebody up to be scared, so they put them in a situation and scare them. And some of the tactics that they use are pretty hilarious and creative. You know, this film doesn't even do that. It doesn't even give you that. So I didn't like it. There's also a terrible CGI shot at one point. So overall, this anthology has one pretty good segment and two underwhelming ones. I do not recommend it. Now, the availability of 3 a.m. is that it is moderately available on DVD and Blu-ray, and it's also on YouTube without subs. Alright, so now we're going to crack into the films that I think are watchable from this year. So you're getting a little bit of an upgrade here. We have another Thai film, of course, to cover. Now, this one is called I Miss You, and this is a horror romance. So this could be interesting here. What do we got? Now, our lead character is a young woman who begins working as a trainee at a new hospital. She becomes romantically interested in the hunky doctor, but the spirit of his dead ex-fiancé does not approve of this. The doctor himself is still kind of struggling with this matter and continues to drop off flowers at the scene of his wife's death every single week. Now, apparently, a few other girls had pursued this man's beautifully sculpted six-pack, but the ghost scared them away immediately. Now, will our protagonist here be able to endure the hauntings and help the doctor move on in the name of love? Now, I have some good news about this movie, right from the start. The director here is the same man who gave us The House from 2007 and The Victim from 2006, two films that I enjoyed and reviewed previously in this playlist. The lead actress here is quite good and likable. The doctor dude is a bit of a gloomy fellow, kind of odd, but, he grows on you a little bit during the film. Runtime of 115 minutes is a bit too long, I think, but I like how this film takes its time to develop the romance and the characters. And some of the romantic elements and moments do work here, both in the present and also in the flashbacks. And there's actually some pretty good dialogue at times, so I was kind of surprised. I have to give it credit for that. It doesn't rush through everything and just throw in a bunch of jump scares. It does make a legitimate effort. Scare tactics, though, in general are pretty cliched, but they are executed fairly well. And there are only a few jump scares, with more of the emphasis on laid-back chills, which again, I appreciate. The ending is a bit of an anticlimax, but it does kind of make sense when you take into consideration the storyline. So, I Miss You is not a scary movie by any means, but I still thought it was a pretty good flick. Now, the availability of this one is that it is moderately available on DVD and Blu-ray. Alright, our next one here is from the Philippines. We're doing a little country hopping tonight, aren't we? So this one is called, and I'm sorry if I mispronounce this, Pridyider, also known as Fridge. And again, from the Philippines. So years ago, Tina was sent away to the United States to live with her aunt because of an incident, I should say, involving her parents that has never really been explained to her in detail. She moves back to the Philippines into their own old home, hoping for a new start. But unfortunately for her, she is not alone in the house. The kitchen is home to a demonic human-eating refrigerator. Now, Tina must dig into the past to discover the truth about what happened to her parents and to find a way to defeat the infernal appliance. Now, this is one of those films where everyone knows what the problem is with the house, except our protagonist. She even asks people, please tell me what's going on, and they just won't bother to tell her. Well, actually, there is a creepy old dude who warns her to leave the house, but she coats his face with pepper spray instead of asking him why, so, I don't know, maybe she's somewhat culpable for this. And that's one of the things I actually liked about our protagonist, though. She's kind of a tough cookie. Early on, her neighbor is snooping around the outside of her home, I think looking for her dog or something, and our protagonist just pulls out a butcher knife and just goes right after her, what are you doing around my house? And she does this multiple times in the film, so I kind of like that. But to be fair, our protagonist is given some information regarding the, what happened between her parents. It's kind of hokey, but certainly entertaining. And after hearing this story, I asked myself this question. Why would anyone actually keep their refrigerator? And even if it isn't haunted, given the history of the house. But fortunately, that question is addressed by the protagonist at one point. So at least this film has a leading lady who tries to take precautions and doesn't take any crap from people. So that's good. Horror sequences are kind of a mixed bag due to the use of some CGI, but they are nevertheless amusing. I must point out that there are a few bloody practical effects that were used, and are highlights, I think, in terms of scares. The storyline is properly developed, and yet again, we have a good lead actress who is likable. Again, important for horror films here. If the lead actress was obnoxious in this, it would have been far more difficult to sit through and more difficult to recommend. I think there's a bit of filler material here, especially regarding the guy named Dick, who is attempting to bed our protagonist. But fortunately for us, Dick acquaints himself with the fridge fairly quickly, so we don't have to deal with him very long. Nothing particularly great about this movie, but it has a certain charm to it. I enjoyed it enough. And if this premise sounds familiar to you, that's because I reviewed a refrigerator segment from the first Shake, Rattle, and Roll film that was released in 1984. So check out my Asian horror videos from the 80s for my thoughts on that one. Now, Pridyider is marginally available on DVD. You can find it if you look. Alright, we continue our country hopping here as we go to China, the mainland. And this one is called Blood-Stained Shoes. Kind of a horror drama hybrid here. Now this film is set during the 1940s in a rural village, and we are immediately introduced to our protagonist, a seamstress who seems to have a good reputation in town. That is, until a rickshaw runner is murdered and dropped in a beautiful river delta. Now at the scene, all that is left is an exquisite pair of embroidered shoes. So our innocent seamstress is suspected of the crime and eventually put to death, but the bloody murders do not stop. The wrongly accused woman returns as a ghost and the villagers begin dying. Now the most striking aspect of this film, I think, is the period setting, which adds some interesting environments. That's one advantage, really, to a horror film set in a prior decade. It transports you to a historical period and place that you may be unfamiliar with. And consequently, some of the cultural aspects here are interesting, like the Ghost Festival. Bloodstained Shoes definitely gets some mileage out of its period setting. Cinematography and camera work are pretty solid as well. Acting is good overall. The most recognizable actress is probably Kara Hui, who has a supporting role. I would say, again, this is not really a scary film. There are 1 or 2 jump scares, and there's also a ghost girl, the Chinese version of which is more humanistic and wears a red dress. So you have some kind of cliches in there, but the scares are okay. I would say that this is more of a dramatic horror film. It does give us a bit of time with our protagonist early on, so that we at least grow to like her before she gets executed. It's a bit of I would say it gets a bit melodramatic in spots, though. Nothing debilitating, but it is there. The short runtime of about 80 minutes makes it an easy sit, though. There's nothing about Bloodstained Shoes that is particularly great, but it's a decent sit. It's good enough for an evening of entertainment, I think. And again, some people like this more than I do. So Bloodstained Shoes is available on YouTube, but without subtitles. Alright, so we shift back again to Thailand. A lot of Southeast Asian films tonight. Really, tonight we're only covering 1 film from South Korea, and 1 film from Japan, and 1 film from mainland China, and the rest are all like Thai films, or Taiwanese films, or Filipino films. So this one from Thailand is called 9981, and it's an anthology again. So this anthology, or also known as an omnibus, of 9 short films, approximately 10 minutes each, surrounds the suicide of a woman in a wedding gown who lived in her apartment complex. Now, Vipa Wee finds out from her best friend that her lover Kong is dead. She decides to take her own life by jumping off of her apartment roof. Now, it turns out to be an evil plan so that her best friend can have the man for herself. Now, what follows is Vipa Wee's vengeful spirit out to raise hell, and the story presents 9 different people who have to deal with her ghost. Now, each segment of this anthology kind of focuses on a different character who interacted with the woman or her ghost. I'm not going to go through every single segment here, but what I will say is that there is some variety to the stories, thankfully. Now, let me give you just a few examples here. Now, segment 2 is called A New Tenant. It's about a comic book artist who has cancer and is basically waiting to die. Now, I liked the interaction between this guy and the ghost, which is, pretty nuanced, I think. The ending, I thought it was also pretty cool. Segment 5, The Maid, has a bit of laid-back black humor because the cleaning lady tries to use the apartment to coerce the ghost into finding out about future winning lottery tickets. So that was pretty creative, I thought, that little short. So this anthology does mix it up a bit, and I like that. Now, 9981 has an interesting plot structure that helps to keep things moving because you get a new story every 10 or so minutes. So that's an advantage to the anthology structure, right? Even if you don't like a segment, you don't have to put up with it that long. Also, the backstory of the dead girl is developed a bit, which I appreciated. And there's also quite a bit of bloody, or moody atmosphere, I should say, to enjoy. Now, there's nothing here that you haven't seen before, okay? and it lacks any like all-time classic moments. But overall, it does establish a creepy atmosphere, I thought. I like the atmosphere in this. The wedding dress imagery is pretty striking, and there are a few effectively creepy moments. There were no specific flaws, really, that popped out at me while watching this, but, like I said, there's nothing particularly great about it. This anthology is basically a collection of moments that range from good to mediocre. That's kind of the definition of it. And that's basically why I'm giving it a lower priority recommendation, but a recommendation nonetheless. Now, 9981 is moderately available on DVD and Blu-ray, and it's also on YouTube, but without subtitles again. Alright. Now, our last film tonight we're going to talk about for a few minutes because it's required. It is a requirement. We're at the point now in this playlist, and I've referenced this before, where my coverage of Japanese found footage or documentary style films is going to increase. Quite dramatically, I think. Now, some of these flicks were shown in Japanese cinemas, but most of them were released direct to video in their home country. Now, these are, multiple franchises that we will be checking out and looking at, some of which are not available with English subtitles. And I covered a few of them in my DVD collection videos for Japan when I did the Senritsu Kaiki file films. I had like 9 of them, all of them without subs. But our next film this evening is part of a long-running franchise that has at least 15 installments as of the date of this video. All of them are available on YouTube with English subtitles for a small fee of like $3 per movie. Now, I am referring to the Yami Douga films, the first 4 of which were released in 2012, and I will be covering all of them in the next few videos. Now, all of these films are standalone stories, so you can watch them in any order, okay? Now, I will leave a link in the description box below to the Yami Douga YouTube channel, which is an official YouTube channel. I'm not sure if those movies are restricted to certain countries, which I would suspect they are for some unknown reason, but I'm certain that they are available to those who live in the United States. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, my favorite so far that I've seen is Yami Douga 12 from 2015. It legitimately scared me, and that's a good one to start with. When I cover, I believe we're going to go to Yami Douga 3 first, next in my review, but if I cover that film, you get a feel for how the films are and you're interested, check out Yami Douga 12 on their official channel. It's a good one to start with. Now, of the 4 films that were released in 2012, I enjoyed all of them to a greater or lesser degree. Of course, I'm going to review these in order of enjoyability instead of, I guess, chronologically. So Yami Douga 2 is my favorite of this batch from 2012, so that will be covered in part 4 of this video. Yami Douga 1 and 4 are more or less tied for second place, so those will be covered in part 3 of this video, which leaves us with Yami Douga 3 as my least favorite of the bunch. So, it's time to review Yami Douga 3, a Japanese horror anthology. Now, this is an anthology of 5 short horror films with a total runtime of 61 minutes. Overall, this anthology is less creative than Yami Douga 2 in terms of its scare tactics. There also seems to be fewer background scares, but when they arrive, they are quite impactful. I do very much enjoy background scares in my horror films, by the way, which is one of the reasons why I really enjoyed Ju-On the Curse from 2000 so much. Lots of background scares in that one. Now, in terms of Yami Douga 3, I would say that the final 2 stories of this anthology are the best of the bunch, and really are the main reason I'm recommending this anthology. So let's briefly go through each segment here. Now, Mountain Pass, okay, you have 2 men go driving at night because one of them purchased a car and wants to try it out. They drive on a local mountain pass during the late hours of the evening, but an eerie entity appears on the road that leads one of them to disaster. Features an unnerving car ride at night. Pretty good segment. Second segment is Red Shadow. This is a video recording during an audition scene for a TV commercial involving snack foods. During the audition, an unusual phenomenon is recorded while filming one of the girls. So this includes some basic video distortion stuff, but it's pretty good. Third short film is Image Video. A young model is being recorded at an apartment complex for the purpose of promoting her on the internet. But the shooting captures some disturbing imagery on camera. Is it because of the rosary beads that the girl picked up in the restroom when she was on her way home? Now, the scares in this are backloaded near the end of the segment, but again, pretty good segment. Now, here's where we get to the good stuff. The fourth segment is called Underground. Now, this is a mysterious video of two men exploring a cave. Now, this is a proper found footage story because only the video was found, not the men, and an eerie image is captured. So, this is a fairly short segment, only a few minutes long, I think, but one of the scarier ones in this anthology, I thought. And then finally, we have Cursed Box. Now, a young woman agrees to have herself recorded while playing Kokori-san at an abandoned hotel for the purpose of calling the spirit there. But a tragic fate is waiting for the crew. Now, this is a good, solid spook fest with an intense and lengthy finale. I mean, heck, the entire segment is creepy, I think, with one of the highlights being a scary doll, which is quite memorable. So yes, I do recommend this anthology. Again, it's probably the weakest or one of the weakest in the entire franchise, but, if you watch a few of the other ones and you really like them, come back and check this one out. Now, as I said before, Yami Douga is available on YouTube with subtitles. I think it's like $3 or something. And I think on YouTube, when you pay to watch a movie, you have multiple days to rewatch it too, so I kind of like that. All right. So that concludes part 2 of our journey through Asian horror films released during 2012. And be sure to join me for part 3, where we will continue to explore some of the better titles from this year. Now, I hope to get that video out sometime in November. Of course, my personal favorite Asian horror films from 2012 will be saved for part 4 of this video, which will hopefully be uploaded in December. So that way we will have 2012 finished, and we could get cracking on 2013 and 2014 next year. So as always, we will see you next time.